At 92, Sir Michael Caine sits back in his London flat and reflects on the film that first made him a household name, Alfie. To the world, it was a cheeky romp through swinging 60s London, a celebration of carefree bachelorhood and witty asides. But beneath the jaunty exterior lay a truth Caine has carried for more than half a century. The role he once believed would launch him into lasting stardom nearly destroyed him, both personally and professionally. Now, with decades of hindsight, he's finally ready to set the record straight and share the untold story behind Alfie's making. Born Maurice Joseph Micklewhite on March 14, 1933, Caine grew up in South London's Camberwell, the only child of working-class parents who struggled through wartime privations. Early on, he learned resilience, scraping by on meager rations, seeking escape in neighborhood cinemas, and dreaming of something bigger than the rubble-strewn streets outside his front door. His first taste of the stage came as a shy schoolboy lured into an amateur dramatics group. The flood of applause sent a thrill through him that never quite went away. Yet in post-war Britain, acting was considered a precarious career, and his parents urged him toward a proper job. He joined the Royal Fusiliers at 18, serving in Korea, where he found himself cast in military variety shows. His first informal training in commanding audiences under bright lights and unforgiving scrutiny. Returning home, he changed his name to Michael Caine, inspired by a John Wayne film he'd caught on deployment. He began hustling for small roles in theater and television, often playing tough Cockney types that chafed against his desire to be seen as more than a one-note tough guy. Roles in the West End and minor film parts came slowly, but he refused to compromise integrity for convenience, turning down offers that smeared him as a generic gangster. In 1964, at age 31, he finally caught a break with the offbeat thriller Zolo, but it was nothing compared to the coup awaiting him the following year. That opportunity arrived in 1966, when producer Lewis Gilbert offered him the lead in Alfie, based on Bill Naughton's stage play about a charming, womanizing rogue drifting through London's nightlife. The part seemed tailor-made for Caine's Cockney swagger and irreverent sense of humor. Yet beneath Alfie's jaunty monologues lay a darker commentary on masculinity, loneliness, and the consequences of a life lived without emotional stakes. Caine recognized the subtext immediately. This was no mere lark. It was a character study demanding depth and vulnerability. On the first day of shooting at Marylebone Studios, Caine arrived in full costume, tailored suits, polished shoes, and a sly grin. Director Lewis Gilbert yanked him aside and issued a quiet warning. "Michael, this isn't just about the quips. I want you to find Alfie's emptiness, his desperation. Make the laughter sting." That charge electrified Caine. He dove into the role with fervor, researching London's underbelly, visiting clubs, and studying real-life Casanovas whose bravado masked aching hearts. The production buzzed with promise. Co-star Jane Asher described Caine's energy as magnetic. He'd break character during rehearsals, flirting with extras, and improvising monologues that left the entire crew in stitches. Yet as cameras rolled, Caine struggled with Alfie's moral ambiguity. He sensed the film's risk. Audiences might cheer the character's roguish charm, but recoil at his casual betrayals. After a day's shooting, he'd retreat to his trailer, poring over each take to ensure he walked the fine line between magnetism and menace. Off-screen tensions soon emerged. The studio pressured Gilbert to soften Alfie's womanizing, cutting lines that branded him callous. Caine argued fiercely for authenticity, insisting that Alfie's cruelty be as front and center as his wit. "If you make him easy listening, you lose the point," Caine told Gilbert late one night under the set's dim floodlights. That stand-off set the tone for the shoot. Caine was not merely performing a role, he was protecting its integrity. Behind the camera, whispers spread of Caine's perfectionism. He demanded multiple takes for the trademark camera break as Alfie directly addresses viewers. Some crew members grumbled at the extra time. Others, like cinematographer Douglas Slocum, welcomed Caine's devotion, noting that each extended take captured an unexpected flicker of pain behind Alfie's bravado. "Michael knew the camera loved him," Slocum later recalled. "But he wanted it to see more than a cheeky smile. He wanted it to see a man teetering on the edge." By the time Alfie premiered in London's West End, Caine was exhausted but exhilarated. Critics hailed his performance as a revelation, praising his raw energy and nuanced emotion. The role catapulted him to international stardom, earning his first Oscar nomination for Best Actor. Yet behind the applause, Caine felt a pang of dread. He'd invested so much of himself that Alfie's reputation would forever eclipse his own. He worried that the playful rogue would stick too closely to his skin, denying him the chance to evolve. And that, he now confesses at 92, is the untold truth. Alfie made him famous, but it also threatened to trap him in a single persona. For years, Caine battled typecasting, dodging offers that demanded nothing more than another slick talker with a winning smirk. He credits his later career renaissance, roles in the Ipcress File, Get Carter, and eventually Christopher Nolan's blockbusters, with carefully calculated breaks from Alfie's shadow. But the burden of that breakout role never fully lifted until today, when Caine finally admits that Alfie was both his greatest gift and his near-fatal cage. Caine returned to his flat in Maida Vale after the Alfie premiere feeling off balance. The triumph of overnight stardom clashed with an unsettling assumption. Everyone adored Alfie, but would they adore Maurice Micklewhite next? Press lined his door with cameras. Studio offers piled up in an anxious hush. His wife, Shakira, watched him sit before shelves of scripts and mutter, "They only see Alfie." That phrase echoed in his mind as he realized his breakthrough performance risked becoming his typecast cage. He needed to prove he was more than a glib rogue, but the offers on his desk tempted him to play safe. He spent hours torn between artistic integrity and career pragmatism. He even considered reprising Alfie for a sequel that offered little challenge beyond fresh jokes and a slicker wardrobe. His agent championed the idea, pointing to box office gold and cheeky banter. Caine bristled at the suggestion. He yearned for a part that tested his range, perhaps a wartime officer, a tragic poet, or a detective haunted by conscience. Instead, studios pressed him for Alfie too, the reunited playboy, older and supposedly wiser. In his journal he scrawled, "I won't trade depth for dollars." That resolve would define his next moves. He began rejecting scripts that leaned on his Alfie persona, a risky gambit in an industry that prizes bankable names over raw talent. His first test came with Get Carter, a gritty crime thriller that offered him a stark contrast to his earlier playboy persona. When director Mike Hodges reached out, Caine saw a chance to shatter expectations. On the London Tube, he scribbled notes about cold, calculating vengeance, rehearsing in silent compartments. On set, he stifled his Cockney lilt in favor of a clipped, steely accent that radiated menace. The raw brutality of Jack Carter's character drenched viewers in shock, signaling Caine's departure from Alfie's playful glint. When it debuted, critics praised his remorseless intensity, and audiences accepted him as a different breed of leading man. Nevertheless, the shadow of Alfie lingered. Even as Caine portrayed tortured war heroes and complex spies, interviewers persisted. "Will you ever play Alfie again?" He learned to navigate the question with a wry smile. "Alfie," he'd say, "was a young man's mischief. I have other stories now." Behind closed doors, he sometimes nursed regret about making Alfie so likable. He wondered if his moral critique got lost amid charm. These doubts surfaced during a late-night interview with a French magazine, where he admitted, "I created a monster in myself." His honesty won praise, but also reminded him how deeply Alfie's echoes traveled. By the mid-1970s, Caine achieved a delicate balance. He accepted commercial films that paid the bills and art house projects that challenged him. He ventured to Hollywood, starring in the Ipcress File remake, then returned to Britain for theater roles that reacquainted him with live audiences. In workshop rooms and dressing room mirrors, he cultivated new identities, each role a step further from Alfie's seductive grin. Though fans still cheered when he dropped a cheeky aside in interviews, he felt empowerment in crafting characters defined by conscience, complexity, and humanity. He recognized at last that Alfie's legacy was not a cage, but a platform, one rickety stage plank among many. At 92, Caine finally feels free to embrace Alfie with gratitude rather than caution. He laughs at early footage, mindful of how one film can both save and constrain. His office now contains a framed smile from the Alfie poster, placed beside awards and scripts for roles he might never have tackled without that initial breakthrough. He often tells young actors, "Take your Alfie, learn from it." and then let it go. In those words lies his truth. The film that nearly destroyed his anonymity also launched a career of fearless reinvention. For Michael Caine, at last, Alfie remains the key that unlocked endless doors rather than the lock that trapped him. He's candid that not every detour worked. When he accepted a romantic comedy in '74, he misjudged tone and ended up with a cartoonish character that delivered laughs at the expense of credibility. Critics dismissed the film as fluff, and Caine weathered barbs in the press. Yet he absorbed the lesson. Even missteps reveal new layers of craft. He wrote in his diary that failure could sharpen instincts more keenly than success. With Alfie looming behind him, every role afterward became an experiment, an invitation to explore facets of humanity beyond charm. That experimental spirit carried him through Tonight's the Night, Educating Rita, and beyond, yielding some of his most profound performances. Today, he thanks Alfie for the unexpected baton it passed him, the courage to stumble, learn, and again reinvent. In the wake of his Alfie breakthrough, Michael Caine discovered that reinvention can become an art form, a discipline as rigorous as any on-screen performance. Throughout the late 1960s and 1970s, he pursued roles that shattered expectations and demonstrated the breadth of his craft. In 1972, when Joseph L. Mankiewicz invited him to play the mysterious playwright Andrew Wyke in Sleuth, Caine seized the chance to shift from rogue to cerebral adversary. On set, he immersed himself in the text, rehearsing labyrinthine monologues until the cadence felt innate. His performance opposite Laurence Olivier became a masterclass in cat-and-mouse tension, earning Caine his first Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor. It was a welcome pivot that signaled he would not remain confined to Alfie's cocky swagger. Next came roles that stretched him further. When Bill Forsyth cast him in The Whisperers, a somber drama about aging poverty, Caine embraced the challenge of portraying quiet desperation. He spent time with elderly residents in care homes, listening to their stories of loss and resilience. That empathy informed his restrained performance, demonstrating that his strengths lay not only in charm, but also in soulful depth. Critics lauded his capacity to disappear into character, and audiences began to trust he could carry any genre. From romantic comedies to gripping crime thrillers, every new role became an opportunity to reinvent the public's perception of Michael Caine. One of the most iconic transformations arrived with Educating Rita in 1983. As the gruff yet compassionate tutor Dr. Frank Bryant, Caine pivoted into a role that balanced humor and indignation. He and co-star Julie Walters rehearsed tirelessly, refining their chemistry until the classroom scenes crackled with wit and warmth. Their final performance captured both the comedy of cultural clash and the emotional tug of personal growth. When Caine won his second Oscar, this time for Best Actor, he confirmed that audiences would embrace him in any form he chose. Alfie's ghost quietly receded into the past, replaced by Dr. Bryant's compassionate skepticism and a career defined by variety. Across the decades that followed, Caine continued to explore new dimensions of his talent. In Woody Allen's Hannah and Her Sisters, he delivered a finely tuned portrayal of Elliot Ansley, blending dry wit with wistful introspection, winning praise for his ease in weaving between comedy and pathos. Under director Leon Lunson, he found unexpected poignancy in roles like The Cider House Rules, where he embodied Dr. Wilbur Larch's contradictory blend of caring and moral complexity. In each project, Caine drew from his working-class roots and life experiences, his time in the army, his London upbringing, and the personal trials he faced, to infuse characters with a blunt honesty. Even into his 80s, he showed that transformation held no expiration date. When Christopher Nolan invited him to play Alfred Pennyworth in the Batman trilogy, Caine embraced the stoic father figure with a quiet gravitas, lending the blockbuster films an emotional core. He later admitted that Alfred's steadfast loyalty and pragmatic wisdom echoed his own approach to life, steady, supportive, and grounded in unwavering principles. Nolan's films introduced Caine to new generations, proving that reinvention could bridge decades and fandoms. Now, at 92, Caine reflects on this journey with wry humor and hard-earned wisdom. He's published memoirs, Why I'm Very, Very, Very Popular, and the more recent What's It All About, each offering candid insights into his career choices and personal evolution. In book signings and interviews, he often recounts how Alfie's success felt like both a blessing and a cross to bear. Yet he emphasizes that each subsequent role taught him something new about performance and life. If you're afraid of change, you'll never be more than your first success, he tells aspiring actors, pausing to deliver the line with mischievous emphasis. It's the same playfulness that fueled Alfie's monologues, now tempered by contentment in a life well lived. Caine's retrospective screenings of Alfie often conclude with a Q&A, where he addresses enduring questions about the film's legacy. Audiences ask if he still feels weighed down by the character. He laughs and replies that Alfie has become an old friend, one he visits from time to time, but no longer fears. He recounts how he framed the original Alfie poster in his home office, not as a trophy, but as a reminder of where he began and how far he's traveled. That attitude embodies his final revelation. Success is not a destination, but a series of invitations to explore new horizons. In personal memoir events, Caine also shares intimate details of self-doubt and resilience. He speaks of nights in dingy hotel rooms, wondering if his gamble to turn down Alfie sequels would cost him everything. He recalls phone calls from fellow actors, some warning that his career might flounder if he refused typecast roles, others encouraging him to stay true to his ambitions. Those voices, he says, became signposts guiding him to roles that resonated with personal meaning. Alfie taught me that grace and risk go hand in hand, he often says, and that a single performance can open doors only if you have the courage to walk through them. Looking back across 75 years of film and theater, Caine acknowledges that his career's defining moment arrived with Alfie, but he also insists it was the first of many chapters. His advice to a new generation is simple: welcome your greatest triumphs, but never let them dictate your next move. At 92, he remains as eager as ever to discover fresh challenges, proving that the actor who once worried about being boxed in by one role has instead become a master of perpetual reinvention, a lesson alive in every performance he's given since Alfie first graced the screen. When I look back now, in the stillness of my flat overlooking the Thames, I realize Alfie was more than a breakthrough. It was a mirror held up to my own heart. At 92, I revisit those London streets not with the swagger of a man chasing the next conquest, but with gratitude for a role that taught me how to bear a soul on film. Alfie's jaunty monologues once felt like triumphs of wit. Today they strike me as confessions of loneliness, and I see in them the vulnerability I was too proud to admit at 31. Last year, I agreed to participate in a feature-length documentary titled Alfie Uncovered. Conceived by an old friend who'd grown up idolizing my character, it interweaves archival footage, interviews with surviving cast and crew, and my own reflections filmed in black and white chiaroscuro. I insisted we include the audio of my private rehearsals, moments when laughter would catch in my throat and I'd pause, overcome by the weight of Alfie's emptiness. Those raw snippets remind viewers that every joke can carry a shadow, and that true comedy often springs from truth. When young actors ask me how to avoid being typecast, I draw on my own story. I tell them, honor the success of a defining role, but never let it define you. Take risks, embrace failure, and seek out characters who frighten you. At 92, I still turn down scripts that feel too familiar. I've learned that a career built on curiosity outlives one built on comfort. Alfie opened so many doors I stepped through only to find new corridors of possibility waiting on the other side. Over the decades, I've used Alfie's fame as a platform for causes dear to me. I supported youth mentorship programs in South London, helping kids write their own monologues and stage performances. We'd perform Alfie's opening speech in local theaters, then break it down line by line, exploring its emotional beats. Seeing teenagers grapple with Alfie's bravado and loneliness, then find empathy in his journey, reminded me that art can heal. Alfie wasn't just my launchpad. It became a tool for community and self-discovery. At home, I watch my grandchildren chase each other through rooms plastered with Alfie posters. They giggle at my old scenes and beg me to recite the window cleaner monologue. I perform it now as a bedtime story, softening the edges of that cocky charm, letting the tender truths shine through. In their wide eyes, I see that Alfie still holds power to spark laughter, to stir thought, and to connect generations across half a century. Recently, Baz Luhrmann approached me with a bold idea, a stage adaptation of Alfie set to a modern soundtrack and stylized as a nightclub review. I hesitated at first, afraid they might tame Alfie's edge. But then I realized rebirth comes from reinvention. Tonight, I'm scheduled to read with the creative team, exploring how Alfie's wit and regret translate into song and movement. It's the kind of creative gamble I cherish now, a reminder that a role born in the 60s can still thrill audiences today. My final on-screen appearance may well be in this Luhrmann production. At this age, every project feels like a gift, and I approach it with the same intensity one gave Alfie in '66. Some have called it a testament to my stubbornness. I call it legacy. I want to step back onto a stage, tuxedo crisp, and look the crowd in the eye as I deliver that cheeky opening line. Not as the young rogue chasing empty pleasures, but as the man who learned to chase meaning. Through all these years, my marriage to Shakira has been my anchor. After Alfie's success, she weathered the glare of the press and the strains of my long shoots. Today, she teases me about reciting Alfie lines at breakfast. Do what you want, 'cause a man's got to do what he can do. I laugh, knowing those words bear both whimsy and warning. Our life together has taught me the greatest lesson, that love, unlike Alfie's fleeting conquests, demands presence and honesty. In quieter moments, I reflect on the regrets I once carried, the fear that I'd never escape Alfie's shadow, the dread that fame would clip my wings. I see now that Alfie's emptiness was my initiation into empathy. It opened my eyes to characters with darker depths and to stories that challenged me to grow. I regret only that it took decades to embrace the gift Alfie truly was, a challenge issued by fate, daring a young actor to break his own heart open and then build a career on its pieces. As this chapter of my life nears its end, I spend more time writing letters, thank you notes to those who shaped Alfie. Ken Hughes, my dialogue coach, that nervous young woman who auditioned alongside me, and the countless crew members who built Marylebone's sets by hand. I believe in gratitude as a final act of artistry, a way to acknowledge the unseen hands that crafted every frame. Alfie may carry my name, but its magic belongs to all who breathed life into it. In the autumn of his life, Michael Caine has turned Alfie from a cautionary tale into a tool for connection. He established the Alfie Foundation in Southwark, partnering with local theaters and charity groups to invite disadvantaged youth to perform monologues from the film. Week by week, he joins workshops, sometimes by video, often in person, sharing stories about how Alfie's bravado masked loneliness. He encourages each youngster to find their own vulnerability, showing them that a single role can illuminate hidden truths. By guiding them through Alfie's opening speech and its quieter moments, he not only teaches acting technique, but also opens conversations about mental health, self-worth, and the restorative power of art. At a recent gala event hosted in the West End's Wyndham Theatre, Caine surprised audiences by reading a newly discovered scene from Alfie's original script, one in which the character confronts the consequences of a broken friendship. The text, penned by Bill Naughton but never filmed, showcased Alfie's capacity for remorse and reflection. Caine's performance was raw and unguarded. Tears glistened in his eyes as he delivered lines he'd only read silently for decades. Afterwards, he explained that unearthing that scene was like rediscovering a fragment of his own soul, a moment where Alfie's cocky mask slipped to reveal regret. Enthusiastic applause filled the hall, not merely for the nostalgia, but for witnessing a living legend still willing to expose his heart. Beyond stage work, Caine has revisited Alfie on screen through masterclass series and streaming specials. In Michael Caine on Alfie, a 6-episode commentary, he breaks down every scene. Why he chose to walk across the frame at specific moments, how he calibrated his tone to suggest both wit and weariness, and the subtlest pauses that reveal Alfie's internal conflict. The series blends lecture and personal memoir, complete with behind-the-scenes photos, vintage interviews, and candid reflections on the film's social context. Caine describes how London's 1960s landscape shaped Alfie's ethos, and how contemporary audiences might reinterpret the character through modern lenses of gender, morality, and cultural change. His work with Baz Luhrmann on the proposed stage adaptation has grown into a 2-year creative collaboration. They've held reading sessions in Sydney and New York, experimenting with a swinging soundtrack and immersive lighting that transforms the theater into Alfie's nocturnal playground. Caine has demanded that any revival maintain the story's original honesty, no sugarcoating Alfie's flaws. We must let him remain a mirror showing both charm and consequence, Caine insists. In rehearsals, he coaches younger actors on how to sustain Alfie's energy across a full evening, emphasizing that shifting between humor and heartbreak is the true challenge of the role. Luhrmann has called Caine's involvement a masterclass in authenticity, praising his willingness to adapt decades-old material for new generations. Parallel to these creative ventures, Caine has embarked on a reflective writing project. His memoir in progress, tentatively titled Alfie's Shadow, delves into the personal cost of fame. He chronicles sleepless nights facing typecasting, the strained friendships that tested his resolve, and the moment he nearly turned down Alfie because he feared its moral ambiguity. He writes candidly about his marriage to Shakira, how her steadfast support grounded him when Alfie's impulsiveness threatened to carry him away, and how family life taught him that true fulfillment comes not from applause, but from shared intimacy. Draft chapters reveal his guilt over working long hours and missing birthdays, and his passion for atoning through mentorship and letters of gratitude. At 92, Caine remains curious and restless, accepting that Alfie will forever be part of his public identity, but refusing to let it define him entirely. He openly encourages fans to engage critically with the film's themes, inviting them to question Alfie's choices and consider alternative endings that emphasize responsibility over recklessness. In online forums, he occasionally drops by under a pseudonym to field questions and challenge assumptions. One fan wrote, "Why did Alfie never apologize?" And Caine replied, "Because growth is a longer script than redemption's shortest speech." That brief exchange underscored his belief that characters, like people, evolve beyond their first introductions. As he prepares for what may be his final public portrayal of Alfie, a limited run in London this spring, Caine reflects on the full arc of his journey. Alfie launched him into fame, threatened to narrow his scope, and ultimately guided him toward a lifetime of reinvention. The role's echo persists in every character he's played since, and now, as he breathes new life into Alfie once more, he does so with both reverence and challenge. In his mind, the story never ends. It simply shifts perspective with each telling. Now at 92, Sir Michael Caine stands on the threshold of memory and myth. In this final act, he has distilled a lifetime of experience into a resting place where Alfie's restless spirit can roam free. The stage adaptation in the West End is scheduled for a limited run this spring, and Caine greets each invitation with the reverence of a pilgrim returning to a holy site. He does not see Alfie as a burden anymore, but as a companion on his journey. And while he knows his steps may falter and his voice tremble, he finds solace in the knowledge that every crack in the armor only deepens the resonance of his performance. Walking onto the theater stage for the first preview, Caine carries no illusions about recreating the vigor of 31-year-old Alfie. Instead, he embraces a version refined by age and wisdom, a man who has walked the road of consequences, whose monologues have gained weight in silence between lines. Audience applause still warms his chest, but he has learned that the most meaningful response arrives in the hush before every punchline, where anticipation and reflection meet. There, in that pregnant pause, he senses the living heart of Alfie beating in the present moment. Each night, after the final curtain falls, Caine retreats to his dressing room where the original Alfie poster still hangs, now dog-eared and slightly faded. Beneath it, he pins a letter from a young actor who credits Alfie's monologues with inspiring him to pursue a career in film. He reads letters like a historian reading ancient scripts, each one a testament to the film's enduring power. These testimonials remind him that Alfie transcends its era, speaking to the universal longing for connection, recognition, and redemption. Meanwhile, his memoir Alfie's Shadow nears completion in a slender volume richly illustrated with behind-the-scenes photographs, handwritten notes, and personal reflections. He writes candidly about the nights he lay awake after Alfie's opening, wondering if the applause heralded triumph or announced the arrival of a spectral typecast. He recounts the joy of roles that followed: detectives, tutors, butlers, and aristocrats, each character a puzzle piece in a kaleidoscope of human experience. Now, as he pens the final chapter, he writes not just about a film, but about a life unfolded across decades of reinvention. In interviews promoting the memoir, Caine often reiterates his core message to actors that no role deserves more power over your destiny than the sum of your talents and passions. He invokes Alfie's lesson that a character's strengths and flaws mirror our own, and that embracing both can yield art that resonates. He reminds young performers that the industry's gaze is fickle, but the compass of authenticity will always point them toward lasting fulfillment. In these conversations, he sees flickers of his younger self, eager, uncertain, poised on the brink of Alfie's next surprise. The Alfie Foundation's work continues to flourish, expanding to summer programs in New York and Sydney. Caine participates remotely in workshops where participants recite Alfie's monologues back and forth, exploring the character's contradictions. Even now, as he contemplates stepping away from public life, he knows that Alfie's spirit will endure through the voices of new storytellers. They carry the torch forward, adding their own verses to the evolving narrative that began on a London soundstage half a century ago. Ultimately, Michael Caine's final truth about Alfie is one of reconciliation. A role that once threatened to define him has become a wellspring of opportunities for growth, connection, and mentorship. He marvels at the irony that a cheeky bachelor's story about fleeting pleasures would steer him toward a lifelong commitment to craft, community, and compassion. And as the lights dim each night at the West End, he bows not just as Alfie, but as Michael Caine, actor, storyteller, and witness to the transformative power of a single role. As this chapter closes, he leaves a parting challenge to us all to honor the roles we play in each other's lives, to recognize the narrators and mentors whose voices shape our stories, to reframe our greatest achievements not as final destinations, but as invitations to new journeys. And in that spirit, he invites audiences to reflect on their own Alfie moments, times when a breakthrough led to unexpected lessons, when triumph gave way to transformation, and when a single performance opened endless doors. Sir Michael Caine has learned that life's true legacy lies not in maintaining a single echo, but in composing a symphony of reinvention that resonates far beyond the closing curtain. His final act underscores how a single role, when embraced with honesty and curiosity, can echo across time, shaping not only careers, but ways we understand ourselves.